It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, Ian Rivers, my co-host. Ian, here we go. We've been talking about it for weeks. This is one of the biggest weeks of Bemidji State sports of the year. Since maybe fall sports with women's soccer and football, but of 2024, let's say. This is the biggest week of Beaver sports this season because of the fact that the NSIC Tourney for men's basketball, the bracket's been released. We know who Bemidji State is playing, and some huge implications at the Sanford Center this weekend for men's hockey. There is a lot to break down in all of this. And I mean, we'll start with men's basketball, but first, Ian, just kind of your gut level reaction. I mean, this is a big week for Beaver sports.
Yeah, it really is. You talk about what's going on. You've got the NSIC Tournament starting up this week. We'll touch on that in just a few minutes here on Wednesday. And then that's going on over the weekend if you are able to advance. And then you've got WCHA Tournament starting up, and where that'll be at, we'll touch on later in the show. And then you got a pretty big weekend. Dare I say, one of the most important, if not the most important, in terms of on-ice implications that the Sanford Center has ever seen. So there's a lot going on, and we're planning on touching on it all here in this episode.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. So why don't we start first off with a couple teams whose seasons wrapped up. And we'll just kind of go right into it with women's basketball. Ian, they had a chance over the weekend to pick up one last win on the season. Couldn't quite get there.
No, not quite. The game against Winona was fairly close. The first quarter graphic came out. It was 24-16. And I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. But then the Beavers had a strong second quarter. And then it was, again, in the third quarter, falling off a little bit. They ended up losing by 9 points, but they didn't really do anything terribly in this game. I guess the one thing that you could say is they rebounded terribly in this game. Now that I didn't see how many rebounds Winona State had. 45 rebounds for Winona State, 25 for Bemidji State. So that seems absurd. I mean, how many offensive rebounds? 11, only 11. So that's not even like a crazy high number for Winona State. It actually is a pretty good number, I guess, when you think about it. But yeah, that's the biggest thing is just they only got 4 points off turnovers. The Warriors did. The Beavers actually won that 5-4. The turnovers were 9-9. So nothing crazy outside of the rebounding. And I guess when you get out rebounded by 20 and it's it was an 11-point game, not a 9-point game, 64-75, not vice versa. So yeah, I mean, it's just a poor shooting day for the Beavs. 43%, a little bit below what you'd love to see, but ultimately, I think it was just a matter of Winona State had more on the line. They were at home, and that's kind of, I think, what it probably came down to in that game. And then they go up against the team that I believe won the NSIC regular season.
Yeah.
Yes, Minnesota State won the regular season outright. And it was a 30-point blowout. Just a lot more talent on that roster for Minnesota State right now. They're a team that's only got 5 losses on the season. And Bemidji State, to their credit, it was a 4-point game at halftime. A 4-point game. Something about when we're recording this, man. My eyes must be fooling me. I thought it was 13-13 and it was 23-13. So it was a 14-point game at second quarter. My math was not adding up. I apologize. I'll lock it in. Trust me, I'll lock it in. But yeah,
you'll lock it in once we get to men's hockey.
Right. By then I'll probably be fine. But yeah, I mean the main thing in this game was the turnovers. Bemidji State, 35 turnovers in this game. 35. That's an absurd number. And Mankato had, 19. When you compare that to Mankato alone had more turnovers in this game than Winona and Bemidji had combined the night before. And then you had 35 turnovers for Bemidji State. An absurd performance. But hey, Mankato, they're pretty good at taking the ball away. Then 23 steals in the game for the Mavericks is quite the performance. When you take into consideration the fact that you turned the ball over 35 times, they shot 46% from the field because they just didn't miss many shots. They just didn't shoot a lot because they were turning the ball over 35 times. That's absurd. I'm almost like questioning whether that's correct. Like it doesn't seem real. Like
you're calling into question the Minnesota State stat keepers.
I don't know, dude. Like 19, they must have been like every time there had to have been something. There had to have been something that they counted as a turnover. That like either that or this was the sloppiest. I can't imagine Minnesota State getting to 92 points, turning the ball over 19 times. It only makes sense if Bemidji does turn it over 35 times because they're getting all these fast break points. Let's look at the fast break points.
When you like average it out, so you take away, it's down to like it's still a plus 14 turnover differential for Minnesota State in that game.
Yeah, plus 16.
Yeah,
35 to 19. So yeah, just nuts. 50 points in the paint for Minnesota State. Like it just, we can sit here and talk about the turnovers all day. At the end of the day, it was going to be a tall task for Bemidji to steal that game, especially on the road against a team who's receiving votes, fighting for their tournament berth. They're getting ready for the NSIC tournament. But yeah, a disappointing end of the season there. Losing your last 4 games, but you had that good 4-game stretch in early February where you won 3 out of 4, played some other close games down the stretch. If you get a couple more bounces in those games, the end of the season looks even better. But the season will end there at 6-20 overall and 3-19 in the conference for Bemidji State. That is good for 15th, which is dead last in the conference. 1 game behind Wayne State, who did pick up a win this weekend. So yeah, that's all I can say about Bemidji State women's hoops. It was a little bit, actually, I think they improved on their win total from last year. I can double check that. But
I think they got more conference wins than they did a year ago.
Yes.
Because I think they had a stretch. I think they had a stretch in. Did they not?
No, they went 8-18 last year, and they went 5-17 in conference. That doesn't feel accurate.
But I felt like they had a second half part where I don't think they won many conference games, like in the calendar year 2023, like when the calendar flipped to January last season. But
they had a pretty rough stretch in there. But yeah, I mean, ultimately the bigger stretch was kind of in November and December. They did not win a game the entire month of December until New Year's Eve
this season.
Of last season.
Right. Yeah, they had a really bad start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will say, though, on this year's, talking about this year's Beaver team, talking about the final weekend of the season, should give a shout out to Alyssa Hill. She did have 18 points in that game against Winona State. So she had a nice night. She ended up going 8 of 9 shooting in that game. And then in the game against Minnesota State had 12 points. Isabel Majewski had 13 points in that one to kind of pace Bemidji State. But, overall, it's just, again, trying to rebuild, trying to kind of reload some pieces and ultimately just kind of trying to see what you have. And, on to next year is basically the thing. I know that we usually go right into men's basketball, but just because of the order of operations here, why don't we talk about women's hockey, Ian, who just wrapped up their season as well over the weekend. Another tough task, trying to play St. Cloud State, and did not go the way of Bemidji State. And that goal differential for BSU women's hockey this season, avert your eyes.
Yeah, it was pretty tough for them this year. Not gonna lie, there was stretches of the season where you felt like things were going pretty well. Results were kind of in your favor. It fell off. An injury had something to do with it.
Yes.
The teams you played had something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
The conference you play in has something to do with it.
It's one of the toughest conferences in women's hockey, if not the toughest, at least on the top end.
Yeah. Late December into January was good. That was a really good stretch for women's hockey. They only picked up 2 wins in that stretch, but the results outside of that felt better than they felt in February, especially. And of course, their season is not over, but you figure after this coming weekend, with a date with the number one team in the country, Ohio State, because unfortunately for the Beavers, St. Thomas was able to pick up a win over the weekend against Minnesota State, and they leapfrogged the Beavers, and the Beavers finished 8th in the conference. They will have a matchup with Ohio State in Columbus. Not that I necessarily think that a matchup with Wisconsin would have been a lot better, but even if it wasn't an improvement from a record perspective, it would have been an improvement in the, standings perspective. But yeah, St. Thomas finishes with 11 WCHA points and Bemidji State finishes with 10. So 8th place and a date with Ohio State. I guess what you're looking for is just not to let up 20 goals, in this series. And I mean, God bless you. If you are able to pick up a win in Columbus, it'd probably be one of the shocks of the women's hockey season.
I think even if you took them to like an overtime or something like that.
Yeah. Even if you hold them within a goal, look for anything. But ultimately, it's going to be another rebuilding off season. Head to the off season. Hope to come back healthier next year. It's a tough conference to play in when you are
so tough.
Lacking. You're already lacking. You lost so much talent. You see all these,
and the talent you
Beavers.
have is incredibly young.
Yeah, exactly. It's a young team. I think goaltending is something that stood out to you at times this season, and it's really hard to get good goaltending when the team in front of you is so injured. So, not making any excuses for anybody, but it was a tough way to end the season with all those injuries. So, hope to bring in some more talent this next season, and I guess hope that you can take anything off of Ohio State. But it's looking unlikely that the Beavers will end up in the WCHA final face-off.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tall task. Let's just put it that way. And I think there is one thing we'll fully eulogize, assuming things go the way that we kind of think that they're going to go. We'll eulogize the season next week. But I will say one thing, though. I think the general demeanor, and maybe I'm way off on this one. I think the general kind of vibe of BSU women's hockey, despite the last 2 years being kind of identical in terms of just overall quality, there's at least a little bit more of like a vibe of like, okay, like things, we kind of like have a vision a little bit here. You know what I mean? Am I wrong on that?
I think you're right on that, but I think that it's an unfortunate circumstance that is the case, because I think this year you saw how many people left, how many girls we had to leave in the transfer portal. And you kind of had lower expectations for this year. So it's not necessarily that this year was any more or less disappointing. It just felt like this year it was more expected that you were going to have lumps like this. Last year it was just like, holy hell, what is going on? Why are we this bad? This year it's like, okay, yeah, we had this many people drop from the team and transfer out and go somewhere else. So I think you're right, but again, it's an unfortunate circumstance, and hopefully we can get over that at some point and try to start turning this program back in the right direction. Because if this becomes the norm every season, and you're just hoping to pick up those wins against Robert Morris, because St. Thomas, it's just like in men's hockey. You can't expect them to be down there every year. You can't expect to say, all right, we got 4 games a year that we can try to pick up wins in, and then God help us that we can win 1 game in overtime against Minnesota State.
Right.
You got to be able to compete. And that's something that hopefully we can see going forward, whatever it's got to take.
Yeah. So let's lighten up the mood a little bit here. Let's talk about the spring sports that have been happening, because baseball, softball, things have kind of started to happen for Bemidji State.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 sports I want to touch on just really quick because they've been underway. Tennis, I don't know if we brought up tennis yet this year. They started February 10th. And unfortunately for them, they're 0-5, 0-4 in the conference. They had a close game earlier this month against Minnesota Duluth in Grand Forks. They lost by 1, 3-4. I assume they just play 7 sets no matter what happens, because most of the scores are 1-6, 0-7, 3-4, like I said, against Minnesota Duluth. So they've been underway. They have a match, this Saturday in Rogers. It is against Wisconsin River Falls. That is at 2:30. against Wisconsin. Like I said, Wisconsin River Falls. So they've been underway. Like I said, unfortunate for them to start 0-5, but I don't know that they picked up a win all of last season. So
I don't think they did.
We'll see how that goes coming down the stretch. This seems like, a team that you might be able to get something against, though. And like you said, baseball started up as well.
Yeah, they are doing great, Ian. They're we're being weirdly kind of snarky today. I don't know. That's not intentional. I think it's just the time we're recording this podcast right now. They are 0-8 on the season with 4 losses that are not, I think they are officially conference games against Wayne State. You lost 12-0, 7-1, and 16-0. That was in a doubleheader, those 2 games where they were played in 7 innings, and then you lost 12-9. And then you played Rockhurst in a 4-game set with 2 of those being in a doubleheader. You can't quite come away with those. And I think it's kind of the same thing so far. And I know things can kind of change in the early part of the season, Ian. But I mean, the last year with Bemidji State was they did not have the pitching to be able to kind of get over the hump on some of this stuff. And it appears right now that they're kind of in that same boat.
Yeah, it seems so. They're giving up a lot of runs. There's only 1 game in there that has less than double-digit runs for the opposing team, and that was still 7 given up to Wayne State. So we'll see how it goes. Like I said, more coming up this week. They've got William Jewell in Liberty, Missouri. They got 4 games against them, spanning from Friday to Sunday, and then Monday they play in St. Louis against University of Missouri St. Louis before they return to NSIC action the following weekend against Augustana. But yeah,
I will say this though, and this is the same thing with softball. Since Nike took over their uniforms, because basically outside of hockey, they're a Nike school now. Their baseball uniforms, great. I love the pin. I like that they added pinstripes. I love pinstripes belong on baseball uniforms. I think there was like a road. I haven't seen them wear it. I think I've seen it like in a promo picture, like one of those game day graphics that the college puts out there. And it was one of the guys, and he was in like a gray, like a road uniform. So it was in the gray with green pinstripes, and it's good. I love it. I love the pinstripes, and they're not produced by Fanatics. So,
you beat me to it. I was going to say, man, I really wish they were a Fanatics jersey though, because they do a great job.
They're doing so great.
Yeah, that's a whole mess in Major League
that
Baseball
would bring a whole different subset of people into the BSU baseball field. If Fanatics was doing their uniforms. Anyway. And the same thing goes with softball. Like their uniforms, I think, like with Nike, it's kind of the same like style as the baseball uniforms. I think they're great. I'm kind of like, I'm a Nike homer, I think, when it comes to uniform design. Like I talked about how I like the football uniforms. Generally, I thought the basketball ones were fine. Like I really like the women's basketball uniforms, even though they kind of feel like a Milwaukee Bucks light kind of style when they have that home Beavers in the white with the green lettering. I think kind of maybe is a little too Milwaukee Bucks-ish, but I'm okay with it. Anyway, softball is 3-6 on their season, Ian. We kind of talked about the momentum that the softball team had last year in the NSIC tournament. And it's been they haven't played any official conference games yet, but they have played USF a couple times. They have played Northern State. They didn't win any of those games. And kind of been the same thing. It just feels like the pitching has not been there so far this season for Bemidji State. In their losses, they're giving up double-digit runs a lot. And I think it's kind of the same thing. Obviously, they just played the 5th team in the country in Grand Valley State in the Rosemont Dome. That'll happen. You're going to lose some of those games. They lost 13-2 in 5 innings, so they got mercy ruled in that one. Now they're going down to Florida this weekend, where they are going to play Montana State, Billings, West Virginia Wesleyan. Yeah, it's the fun part of the season where the baseball and softball teams go to tournaments. Although baseball would always go to like Missouri, and the softball team always went to Florida. I never understood that. If I'm the baseball team, I'm like, all right, where are we going to go for a tournament? Arizona, Texas, Florida. Oh, we're going to Central Missouri.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, they got a whole week and they're playing a whole lot of games.
Right.
Before they go back to Central Missouri. and play them in that
really.
one. And then they go play a bunch of games in Missouri. And then in late March is when they finally start to do the conference games. But Ian, I think they're going to be playing on the BSU softball field by April.
Yeah, I mean, that is the positive to take from any of the spring sports this year that play outdoors, is the fact that it will be so nice. I mean, it's been nice already. Like, I feel like that's going to be really fun, and so hopefully that these teams can put together some competitive games so that students can get out and engage on the field, the baseball field, the softball field, watch those games. Softball, a little bit more positive so far than the other two sports we talked about. They have won 3 of their last 4, even after starting 0-5. So that's some positivity. And yeah, I mean, they've got a whole slew of games here in Florida: Montana State, Billings, Queens College, College of Staten Island, Mercyhurst. That's a familiar name if you're a hockey fan. Trevecca Nazarene volleyball team played them earlier this year. So a lot of games coming up. And yeah, like you said, hopefully by late March, the BSU softball and baseball fields are ready to go.
Yeah, no games on the Chet this year, I think is the goal. The one thing for Bemidji State softball that might be disheartening is the fact that 3 of their first 6 losses came from teams that are in your conference in USF, Northern, and Upper Iowa. But you got plenty of time to kind of shake out the rust on some of that stuff, and they're not official conference games. So there you go. Okay, we've gotten all the other stuff out of the way. Now we can get to the meat and potatoes of this podcast. Here we go. NSIC tournament is here. Bemidji State has their matchup. Ian, where are the boys going?
Well, unfortunately, they will be going to Sioux Falls this week. Bummer. Wednesday at 6 p.m. in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to play the University of Sioux Falls. BSU finished their season 3-9 over their last 12 games. That's as lightly as you can put it. If they pick up any one of those 9 losses, they have a home playoff game. And excuse me for being a little disappointed. It's we talked about it last year with men's hockey. I mean, they were in a perfect position to at least finish with home ice. And they ended up squandering that and having to go to Marquette and lost that series in the first round of the CCHA tournament. Now you're in a position, CJ, where after the Winona State game, I'm almost certain that we were probably talking about how can we jump into the top 4? What can we do over this next stretch? I mean, we have games coming up against Minnesota Duluth, Minot, MSU Moorhead. All those teams are in front of us right now. Can we make some noise against them, pick up the other wins? And then you go on a 6-game losing streak and you're like, oh my God, are we even going to get a home game? Then you win 3 in a row and we're like, all right, cool. All we got to do is win one of these games and we'll be in a really good position. And they didn't do it. And so now you have a situation where, yeah, you're tied with Sioux Falls and you own the tiebreaker with Sioux Falls, having beaten them 2 times this season. But Wayne State swept on the weekend. And that means it's a 3-way tie at, I believe, 9-11 or whatever it is at the bottom of the conference, or for 8th place, which means that the teams have no longer 9-13. Sorry. The teams have no longer played a balanced schedule against each other because Wayne State's only played BSU once, but BSU's played Sioux Falls twice. Now they go by strength of schedule. Sioux Falls has a harder strength of schedule. They get the top seed in that 3-way tie. So if you would have just picked up one more win, you have a home playoff game. And at least then you have something to say, all right, cool. It just feels a little disappointing to finish the way you have. Again, like we talked about last week, I think this team is talented enough where they can go. Sioux Falls is a good matchup for us. We've beaten them twice this season. Close games both times, yeah, but we've beaten them in Sioux Falls.
And one of those wins late in the season where you were sliding, you still were able to beat them.
Yeah, exactly. So the matchup itself is not bad. And then you set yourself up for a date in the first round of the the first round of the Pentagon section of the tournament, the quarterfinals, would be against Minnesota State, because unlike the CCHA tournament, these games don't reseed. You would just end up playing Minnesota State in the second game. The first round matchups, BSU and USF. You got SMSU taking on SCSU. Augustana and Wayne State play each other, and then Winona State playing Northern State. So those are the first round matchups that'll take place on Wednesday. Again, if you want to go, if you're a big BSU basketball fan, it's in Sioux Falls, which is quite a drive from Bemidji. It's not undoable for somebody like myself in central Minnesota, but yes, it will not be in Bemidji, unfortunately. BSU just not quite able to pull out a win against Winona State or Minnesota State this weekend. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what we can do. You know, if BSU ends up winning this, it'd be pretty hard. We've discussed trying to get on and do a little, you know, extra segment of a podcast, and we might not be able to get that done just with scheduling. But I still might try to do something if BSU is able to win, just to preview a little bit of that matchup with Minnesota State. So we'll see. I'll keep you posted on Twitter. If you don't follow us on Twitter, go follow the Beaver Banter page, Beaver Banter Podcast on Twitter or X. But hey, I mean, I don't think you could ask for, I mean, you could, but in terms of a quarterfinal matchup, BSU's played Minnesota State pretty close this year. So again,
well, and imagine how much closer that game against Minnesota State would be. That's your final game of the season. Both teams are playing for stuff, but Bemidji State goes into the locker room at halftime with a lead. Imagine if they didn't shoot 19% from beyond the 3-point line. If Bemidji State even has just an average game at the 3-point line, how different does that game look?
In the second half, 11%.
And that's been the thing for this team all year long. It's been turnovers and 3-point shooting, it feels like. They've turned the ball over a lot, and they've just been really streaky from beyond the 3-point line. Early in the season, they were effective from 3, and it feels like that part of their game has disappeared. And if they can find some way to even just get it for a week, they can make another run. And that's what they did last year, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the shocking part to me is you're shooting that many times from beyond the arc. Like, man, if it's not working, they're only playing 7. They're already in tournament mode. They're only playing 7 deep in their rotation. That these guys are putting in a lot of minutes. Dalton Albright played 40 minutes in this game, all 40 of them. BJ Davis played 36. So not a lot of minutes going to bench players, but it just, you know, like you said, if they can start shooting well, they can compete with anybody. We've seen them have huge shooting performances. Let's go back and look at the box score against Northern State, which a game they won by 16. Bemidji State shot 33% from the 3-point line. That's right about the minimum you want to be shooting at if you are shooting at that many 3-pointers. So I think that they just have to be a little bit better shooting. I don't know if they're taking poor shots or if they're just, you know, forcing late in games. Like maybe 6 of those threes came with under a minute left when they're down by 10 and they're just trying to do anything they can to make a shot go in. But at the end of the day, those 6 aren't going to save your field goal percentage, even if they go in. So, like, you know, well, if they all went in, it would. But yeah, just a little bit disappointing just because of what we saw last season with men's hockey, the last couple seasons. But let's hope it's a little bit more like 2 seasons ago where BSU's men's hockey team was able to salvage it with a good tournament run so that we kind of forgot about the skid they took at the end of the season. But yeah, BSU, Sioux Falls, I like the matchup. Obviously, they've beaten them twice this season so far. I think that BSU can do it. I talked about it last week. This team's good enough. We saw them earlier in the year when we were talking about, all right, we're 5th in the conference. How can we pick up a couple more games and start to challenge for that first round bye? We saw this team play at its potential, and they just got to try to find a way for 1 week, like you said, CJ, to try and jump and jumpstart their offense, you know, a little bit. But yeah, if they win Wednesday, like you said, like we said, we'll keep you posted. But the quarterfinals are on Saturday and Sunday. Depends on what matchup you get, when you're going to play. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. But then, yeah, Sunday through Tuesday or Saturday through Tuesday will be the NSIC tournament on both the men's and women's side. They're played pretty simultaneously there. That's why the quarterfinals are over a stretch of 2 days. But yeah, looking at statistics, Sioux Falls, 6th in the conference in terms of overall defense, and they are 12th in the conference in terms of overall offense. So BSU sits middle of the pack in both, 7th in offense, 9th in defense. So two pretty middle of the road teams are going to meet up in Sioux Falls, but one of them's got to come out victorious, and we hope it's the Beavers.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it's like here's basically what you said, to boil it down. Why not us? Why not us in this game for Bemidji State? I mean, they've beat USF twice. We talked about how even when they scuffled towards the end of the season, they still were able to get a win over the Cougars in that one. Cougars. I always feel like I want to say Cougars, Panthers, Wildcats. It's like all
pretty sure it's Cougars, but yeah, Cougars and Panthers has been the thing that's like, wait, I'm pretty sure. No, I'm 99% sure at this point that it is Cougars.
It's got to be the Cougars, but great research by me in this on-air production meeting. But I just think overall, like you talked about, I think USF does play good defense. Does that impact Bemidji State's ability shooting? Because I think we've seen this team, when things don't go right, they do not go right, and that's going to be the biggest thing. I mean, can they limit the turnovers, and can they limit the turnovers, and can they get decent shooting? Because overall, and again, looking at the Minnesota State game, the Mavs are able to get 15 points off of turnovers. Bemidji State only 8. So that's +7 just off of turnovers alone in that ball game. And I just think overall, I think Bemidji State, obviously, like, comparing them to one of the top teams in the country isn't always fair, but I just think that this team's got the ability to win this game. Even though they have not played well in the second half of the season, I'm still rolling with Bemidji State to beat Sioux Falls.
Yeah, I think they can, and I think they will. They match up pretty well with this Sioux Falls team.
It's going to go down to the wire, though. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah, it'll be a close game. It'll be just like the Augustana game last season, where BSU, they had it all game, but Augustana was always there. I'm sure this one will be even tighter. And just really quick to wrap up, looking at some of these statistics where BSU has struggled this year has absolutely been turnover margin and three-point shooting. They are the 13th best team in the conference, so third worst in terms of three-point percentage, down there at 32%. Only MSU, Moorhead, and Mary are below them in terms of overall three-point percentage, but BSU shoots significantly more threes than both of those teams. And then turnover margin, they are second worst in the conference. Only Minnesota Crookston has a worse turnover margin to them. The thing is that BSU has going for them is they're a top 2 team in rebounding in the conference. And in terms of assist to turnover ratio, BSU is actually number 4 in the conference. And you might be saying, how is that even possible? This team has the most assists in the conference this year, 442. That's 6 more than Minnesota State and 41 more than third place Augustana. But if you look at the number of turnovers, they have the third most in the conference at 321. So the ratio is very good of assists to turnovers, but they turn the ball over a lot. So they just have to make even more assists to make that number look good. So yeah, three-point shooting and turnovers, those are got to be the 2 main keys for this team to make a deep tournament run.
One other thing that I think will be interesting for this matchup between Bemidji State and Sioux Falls, if you look at team free throw percentage, Bemidji State is 11th out of 15 in the NSIC with a free throw percentage of 69.6%. That's where they're sitting right now. Sioux Falls is right below them with 68.9. So, it's weird to say free throws are going to be a key for 2 teams that have not shot from the stripe well, but also that means that every time you get it, you better make the most of it because they might not. So it'll be interesting to see how many times each team can get to the foul line, and if they're gonna take advantage of that. Looking at the stats here, so overall, it's gonna be a game between 2 teams that probably are where they're at for a reason.
There will be a basketball team. There will be a basketball game played on Wednesday in Sioux Falls.
One team has to win.
Yeah. I'm just looking at this. One of the weirdest stats ever has to be opponent free throw percentage.
Like you have anything to do
with you have anything to fucking do with that. Like Sioux Falls is second worst, guys, in the conference with an opponent field goal or free throw percentage of 76. It is easy as hell to shoot free throws in Sioux Falls.
I think that's like what Vikings fans say about opposing kickers. It's like they have we have the worst Vikings fans go, we have the worst opposing kicker percentage because they just come in here and drill 61 yards with ease, whether it's home, away, whatever. I think you should attribute, though, if you're a school and you lead in terms of opponent free throw percentage, I think it just means Augustana's just got a good student section. I think that's what that means.
Right. Yeah.
Like they just got a good environment. Like I'd attribute that more than to like the players on the court, unless they're just great at trash talking.
Like, because Augustana's at the top of that list, which is bad. Right, because if you got a high number, that means the teams shoot well.
Oh yeah. I see what you're saying.
So it would be MSU Moorhead, who's got a really good opponent field goal percentage. I just tabbed over
Augustana's
to see.
home place sucks.
I just tabbed over to the women's team. I know we already talked about them, but I've been drilling them for free throw shooting all year. And in terms of free throw attempts, second lowest in the conference. They did not get to the free throw line enough this year. They were basically, they shot like half of the free throws that UMary did this year, which really is just not enough. And obviously there's going to be some teams that don't get fouled as much as others. That's not everybody's going to shoot 450 free throws a season. But yeah, I think I just wanted to check that out because I know I've been harping on their free throw attempts all season, but second worst in the conference kind of checks out for me on that one.
Another stat, combined team rebounds. Bemidji State finished second in the conference in the regular season with 1,099 rebounds as a team. Sioux Falls, 1,037. So Bemidji State, the better rebounding team in this one as well. But here's the other thing. Here's the kicker. In terms of opponent rebounds, Bemidji State is fifth with 926, which is fifth worst. The best team in never mind, actually, because Concordia St. Paul's at the bottom, and they've allowed rebound 1,103 team rebounds. So opponent rebounds, I should say. So never mind. Bemidji State's been pretty good in the rebounding department. I mean, you would be when you have the guys that they do, with Albrecht and Sutherland and some of those guys. So rebounding again, key for Bemidji State in this one. I'm just kind of going through some of these stats here, just kind of seeing what sticks out. Weirdly enough, though, in terms of block shots, Bemidji State is second worst in the conference in blocks.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, when you look at Sutherland and Albrecht, they don't really look like super imposing defensive players in terms of post play. Albright a little bit more than Sutherland. I've noticed more of Sutherland's offensive game, so that doesn't necessarily surprise me. But you would think like a team that just
an indicator of good defense too,
right? Like in high school, I think that per percentage of like stats that I accumulated, for some reason, blocks might have been like the thing that I had the most of, like per minute that I played, even though I wasn't a very good defender. Like man-on-man defender, no, I would get burned and then I would like block them from behind. Like, and in my head, blocked by James. Like, that's what I'm saying as I'm like blocking this 5'6" guard that I'm guarding. But yeah, so it is, like you said, it's not necessarily a 100% indictment of how good a defensive player is. It's a lot about positioning and timing because, as you know, a fraction of a second off, you're fouling them, you're hitting their arm instead of getting balls. So it's not necessarily a one-on-one like defensive stat. But
all right, let's finish things up by talking about hockey. And we've kind of been pushing hockey to the back burner. Now that we've kind of worked through some of this stuff, we're going to get it to more at the beginning of the podcast. But we had an episode with Jared Robato of the Pioneer Press Bemidji Pioneer, excuse me. He's the sports editor there. And great interview. Like, he was great to talk with. Go listen to that last week. We had another episode kind of previewing the series that was just us on the podcast. Ian, we are going to be talking with Lucas later in the week to preview what is going to be a very, very big series for Bemidji State, and probably their biggest series at the Sanford Center in 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I might go so far. I might go so far as to say it's the biggest series in Sanford Center history, because I know it's not that old of a building, and I know that BSU has not been like the most successful team since they've moved into it.
In the Sanford Center era.
In the Sanford Center era, exactly. Like, you know, you're talking about the glass. It's a whole new story. In the Sanford Center era, I'm thinking about the biggest weekends we've had. I'm thinking about Michigan Tech 2017. They're coming in, but there's still 3 weeks left of the season. And obviously that series had massive implications, because if you get swept, Michigan Tech is like right on your heels. They might have even like been tied with you. I'm not sure how the standings worked out at that point. But BSU was able to sweep, which meant, hey, we basically have this thing in check. We just got to win like one more game. Like you said, like 4 years ago, 2020, right before the season shut down, I misspoke last week when I talked about where the standings were at. BSU was down 6 points to Mankato heading into that series. So they would have had to sweep Mankato to clinch a share of the CCHA title. They ended up splitting the points 3-3. Bemidji State finished 6 points behind them. This one, you're coming into it with the lead. You need 1 point to clinch a share of the CCHA regular season title, the McNaughton Cup. You need 2 points to win it outright. So a win in any capacity, overtime, regulation, does not matter. You will win the conference outright for the regular season, which is what we've been working towards this whole season. And yeah, I mean, it can't be overstated. Even if you don't think it's the biggest series in regular season history, I mean, even Sanford Center history, regular season or not, Beavers have not hosted any championship games at the Sanford Center. The only time they would have had the chance, they lost in the semifinals to Bowling Green. They didn't actually get there. So I think that this, with a title on the line, might just be the biggest. If you want to dispute that, go ahead. It's not, you know, it might not be, but I would encourage you to bring up any bigger ones if you have them in mind. It will be a green out. If you have Beaver green, wear it to the game. I don't want to see anybody there wearing their white Beaver jerseys. If you don't have one, go buy one. Come on. But yeah, it's a green out all weekend, both nights. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm traveling up there. Do I have to have white one night and green the other night? Nope. It's green both nights. Obviously, Saturday night is senior night. So obviously what the Beavers want to do is they want to win on Friday so they can lock everything up, start their seniors, give Enright another game, give Scholl a night off before the playoffs start, all of that fun business. But yeah, I mean, it's a massive, massive weekend. The importance of it cannot be overstated. Yeah, and obviously, like we said, we'll be talking a lot more about the specifics of what happened last weekend when Lucas comes on later this week. But just a quick synopsis of it. Beavers pick up 5 points against St. Thomas. Friday night was very, very interesting game. It was very exciting, but man, and again, we'll talk more about this. I hate being the guy that just uses the ref excuse, right? I hate it. Right. But I genuinely think that was one of the worst officiated games I've ever seen in my life. Like, no cap, no kizzy, whatever the kids are saying nowadays. That was bad. Like, it probably cost the Beavers their chance at, I mean, they would be at 43 because St. Thomas scored a goal on Friday with like however many seconds left in the game. Yeah, you can also say like, yeah, if Scholl gets a little bit better wood on the puck, I don't know if you saw any of it, CJ, but what happened is basically Matthias Scholl was trying a clearing attempt to get the puck out of the zone, just clear it, anywhere will do, and he didn't get enough wood on it. A Tommy player was able to catch it out of the air, put it down, and of course, Scholl is now out of position, passes it forward. Everybody from St. Thomas had to be in the right spot. but there was basically a wide open net that the Tommies were able to hit and force the game to overtime. But then Jackson Judding was able to win it in overtime. It was a really fun game, 6-5. Saturday night, much more dominant, 3-1 win. Man, it was one of those games, though, that made you think, like, BSU dominated that second period, dominated it. St. Thomas was shorthanded as hell. They only skated 16 players. I think one of their players, Prokop, he suited, but he never actually played, I don't think. I saw an account that was like, I've seen Prokop suited up, but I don't think he's played. So they're playing like 10 forwards all game. They're shorthanded. BSU, like, dominated the second period. I think it was like 23-6 in shots in the second period, but Jake Seibel like kept them in the game, made phenomenal save after phenomenal save. Nuts. This is just a quick synopsis. I'm not going to go too into detail, but the Beavers take 5 points. Everything else pretty much went your way. Michigan Tech swept Bowling Green. Lake Superior State took points from Mankato, which was crazy. They were like 4-31-4 or something going into the weekend, all time against Minnesota State. And they won the game on Friday. They had the game tied on Saturday, and I think it was Jared Carabas scored with 43 seconds left for the Mavs. Because they've got some lucky horseshoe. And every time there's a game in Mankato late in the season, they pull it out. And so they're now 4 points behind instead of 5 or maybe 6 if Lake State wins in overtime or the shootout. But hey, BSU is going to be tested. They've got to get just one win. And I feel like I've been rambling because I'm trying to save most of my points of interest from this stuff for later in the week when we have a good discussion with our friend Lucas. But man, what an exciting weekend of hockey it was overall. And one thing I do want to touch on is like we said earlier, the collapse that we saw over the last couple of seasons, and just comparing that to, and of course this season isn't over, and the comparison would be, it still would kind of feel like a collapse, right?
Right.
Probably the worst you can finish is second in the conference. Michigan Tech and St. Thomas are 6 points behind you. So if one of them swept, I think you have the tiebreaker over the Tommies in a 1-to-1 heads matchup. I don't know that you do against Michigan Tech, but I would have to ask an expert about tiebreakers with those two teams. But the likelihood is, even if you don't win it, you're going to finish second place, which is not a complete collapse, right? But it's just the fact that you come in 4 points up, you're at home, and if it was anybody other than Mankato, I would feel pretty confident. Those guys scare me to death. Even with a new coach, even with a almost brand new roster, they just feel like I said, they've got a horseshoe stored somewhere, and they're going to pull this out. But I love where BSU is at right now, and I've got stats to compare the last 2 seasons. After New Year's last season, BSU went 5-10-1 overall, with it including 5-9 in the conference for 14 points, which is good for 1 point per game over the last stretch of the season last season. This year, after New Year's, BSU is 7-3-2 overall, 6-2-2 in the conference, good for 20 points at a pace of 2 points per game, doubly as good as they were last year in these scenarios. Obviously, they'd have to pick up 4 points, which will be good enough for us against Minnesota State this weekend to keep on that pace. But just even when you look at the losses, the 3 losses that have come post New Year this year, you've got Ferris State. That's the first one. You're in Ferris State. It's January 6th. You're still missing the World Junior boys, Magnuson and Polkamp. Loft is out. Judding is out. Engstrom is out. There might have been more. I don't know that there was more, but for sure those 5 are not playing for you. That's a lot of guys, and a lot of guys that's a potential CCHA freshman of the year. That's a potential CCHA defenseman of the year. That's 2 of your better forwards that play on your 3 of your top lines. And then Liam Engstrom, who isn't necessarily getting ice time right now, but especially in a situation like that, he would have been good to have as depth. I think that they were skating everybody they could. So you drop that game, but I think given the circumstance, you say, all right, we got 3 out of 6 points that weekend. You have a week off, you come in, you play in Houghton, you play for all intents and purposes a pretty good game against Michigan Tech. but it's hard to win in Houghton. And I respect Jared, and I think he's correct. You can win them all, but the likelihood is really low. You're going to drop a game or two when you have to play in Houghton. So they dropped that game. And then the only other one was a game against Augustana, where you still don't have Kyle Loft. And it really doesn't matter. It's a non-conference game. Points aren't on the line. Pairwise is out the door at this point. So just the quality of losses hasn't been as bad as it was last year. And that's the main thing that I wanted to touch on, because no matter how it goes against Minnesota State, yeah, if they get swept, it's going to suck, not being able to close it out and have all this success over the last 3 weeks. But they've gotten 5 points from each of the last 3 weekends, going into Marquette and taking 5 points, a win and a tie with a shootout win, taking 5 points from a scrappy Ferris State team who, played better than they are in at least Thursday's game. And then the first period of Friday's game, and then going on the road. Granted, it's a shorthanded Tommy's team, but man, they looked good, especially on Friday. They looked like they could take points, and they took one. But yeah, just the way the Beavers are playing right now gives me confidence that they can at least win one game against Minnesota State and close this thing out. And it's going to be so fun. I'm going to be there. I know Lucas just said he got his tickets. So if you're a Beaver Territory fan, get up there, get his autograph. I'm sure he would love to do that for you. Yeah, we're hoping that the place is just packed. I know it's been an attendance issue all season long, but
if there's one weekend to break the trend,
exactly.
This is the weekend to do it. And not just to support a team that has a chance to do something it hasn't done in 7 years, but also to keep the darn Mankato fans out of our building. That's number one. I went to the homecoming game for football, and you know what? Those guys suck. Keep them far away, because if they bring that stupid train horn up there, I think Ian's gonna go insane.
Yeah, absolutely. The Tech fans drove nuts when I was up there for that crazy comeback game, Mankato. Hopefully we outnumber them. God help us if we don't. And, like I said, I know attendance has been an issue this year, but truth be told, I think that there's a bit of an excuse for it. Like the way the schedule was set up this year, it never felt like you were getting into a rhythm with the games, right? You start off, you got a cool weekend with the Icebreaker tournament, then you play Duluth, you play St. Thomas, and then, you play some conference games back to back to back. You get into stretch, and then Thanksgiving hits, and you play in North Dakota, and then you play Lake Superior State. And then especially in the second half of the year, it's just all jumbled. You didn't play a home game all January. You didn't play, from January 20th to February 9th, you didn't play a single game that mattered for any points. And honestly, the attendance against Augustana was actually pretty good. And then you play Ferris State, and it's a Thursday, Friday, and it's just been terrible with Thursday, Friday. Yeah, on the ice, it looks good. The ice, the attendance is a little spotty because it's a Thursday. But I truly believe that there's going to be plenty of people in this building for the Minnesota State series. And hopefully we can pull it out because, we'll focus on playoff matchups and everything like that come next week. We're going to be locked in, just like the team is, I'm sure. We're going to lock it in, and we're going to make sure that we're set on the McNaughton Cup. We'll focus on the Mason Cup later, guys. We'll focus on that later.
You can't get to the Mason Cup if you don't get the McNaughton Cup, or at least theoretically. And by the way, people can say, well, does it really matter? Like, think about how weird the conference has been this year, and there's a case to be made that, this is, there's upsets going to be aplenty in the tournament, but also with a year as much parity in the CCHA there is, getting the 1 seed and making sure you face a team that's at the bottom is very important. This is not the year to be a 3 seed where, you can get got by a team. You know what I mean? If you're going to be the highest seed possible so you can get those wins.
Here's the main thing, and I didn't want to talk about it, but I guess we're going to talk about it.
You can make it like a quickie point, and we'll go further into it.
If you win the conference, you play Ferris State. Ferris State's abysmal, man. They're the one team in this conference. You feel pretty confident in a 3-game series. You can take at least 2 of them. You know what I mean? if Northern Michigan sweeps Bowling Green this weekend, Lake Superior State will finish 7th in the conference. Lake Superior State has owned you this season. I do not want to play them, regardless of whether or not they're 7th in the conference. I mean, that's just not a matchup that I'm, intrigued in. Northern Michigan, I think, yeah, sure, let's go. I'll play Northern Michigan if but even them, it's like, they've got the offensive firepower. We saw it last season, and we saw it already this season a little bit. You don't necessarily want to play them either. There's not a whole lot of great matchups. The one thing I will say, and even if you're a 2 seed, you're going to have a lot of home games in the tournament if you keep advancing. The Beavers are 10-6 at home this season, 5-9-2 on the road. They're a much better home team. They're a much better home team this year. And obviously on the road has been better as of late, sweeping St. Thomas and tying and winning against Northern Michigan. But yeah, I mean, statistically, they've been much better at home than they have been on the road. So that is the main thing that makes me want to say, yeah, absolutely. I think that being the 1 seed would be fun. And I mean, don't forget about the fact that you get hardware if you win. Like, at least you have something. If you go into the McNaughton Cup or into the Mason Cup and you choke, at least you have the McNaughton Cup to fall back on. You know what I mean? And obviously you want to win both, but yeah, you want to win the McNaughton Cup when it's there right in front of you. And the cool thing would be, last time we won it, the ceremony was in freaking Alabama. They didn't come back. I was really surprised that they didn't come back to the Sanford Center the next weekend after they clinched and have some sort of a little ceremony before the game and say, they lifted it up or anything, like they put it on the ice or something. It was there, but they didn't do anything with it. I thought that was pretty lame. So this time, if you clinch it, they're going to be on your ice, and it's going to be super amazing. So
you're going to do it against Mankato. And if there's a team to do it against, I know we mentioned like we're scared of Mankato, but like in a way, but also
just
in a way,
they're lucky, man. They're not good. They got some sort of magic. They did it twice last year, dude.
They have the devil magic.
Twice to win the McNaughton Cup and the Mason Cup last year. Like, it was nuts.
The Mason Cup 2 years ago.
And 2 years ago, the last 3 trophies that they've won has been absolutely absurd, like, circumstances behind it. So that's exactly that is what terrifies me about this weekend. So what better team to do it against than to do it against the Mavs? So I think, Ian, for those who are watching on YouTube, Facebook, and X or Twitter or whatever, let's give a big old horns down as we get ready to close out this podcast. So I always forget where my camera is when I do this.
It's okay. I'm trying to block the folding table that's right behind me because I've been moving a lot of stuff in my house to clear out space in a different room. So I had to move a lot of storage into here. So apologies for the people watching. At least you get to finish with a horns down gesture. Okay, so we'll be back later in the week. We're going to talk with Lucas of Beaver Territory, and we're going to go all in on this big series this weekend at the Sanford Center. So until then, we'll see you next time. This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast.